Good. So on today's agenda, if we go to the next slide, we are going to focus on the third point here about ethical and effective lobby and advocacy, and a bunch of principles that can really guide your work in that sense, called CLASP, that we have coined CLASP, followed by questions and answers. But before that, we're going to look at an example of how not to be ethical in lobbying and what that can cause, the problems that can cause. Just to repeat, maybe the whole webinar is short. It's a teaser, so to speak, and at 11:40 we should be through just about. So now Sabina is going to take us through how not to lobby because of the devastating consequences that can have. The floor is yours, Sabina.
Thank you so much. Yes, I want to show you a little clip about unethical lobby in the European Parliament. And this little clip is made by Politico. So let's have a look.
Suitcases of cash, phones and computers seized, senior politicians arrested. The expanding police probe into allegations of criminal organisation, corruption and money laundering has rocked the EU bubble and raised questions about the democratic foundations of the European Parliament. The fact that it allegedly involves World Cup host Qatar when the spotlight is firmly on that country has only added to the intrigue. Belgian police have raided 20 locations and charged 4 people. There were more arrests in Italy and further investigations at the Parliament in Strasbourg. So far, all appear to have links to the Socialists and Democrats group. So who is allegedly involved? Here we map the connections between some of the people caught up in the investigation. The most high profile of those charged is Eva Kaili, a Greek MEP and former news presenter who within days of the scandal breaking was stripped of her role as one of the Parliament's 14 vice presidents. She was detained with her father, Alessandros Kailis, who was later released by police. Her partner, Francesco Giorgi, who is an advisor to Socialist MEP Andrea Cozzolino, was also charged. Giorgi's alleged involvement highlights an organisation with connections to some of the other people under investigation by police. Giorgi founded Fight Impunity.
Stop it, sorry, it's okay.
A Brussels-based NGO that describes itself.
Sorry. Yes. We just wanted to show you a very short snippet, but of course you can see the whole video on Politico. And in this little clip, you can see how members of the European Parliament are put in the spotlight because they have accepted bribes to speak favorably about Qatar. And as a reaction to this scandal, the European Parliament is discussing rules for parliamentarians to make this kind of influencing more difficult. There already is a transparency register in the European Union where meetings between lobbyists, parliamentarians, but also with representatives of the Commission and the Council should be registered. And there are rules about receiving gifts, for instance. On the other side, there are lobbyists who have designed these schemes and offer suitcases full of money for a favorable statement or decision to support their case. Is that ethical? I would say no. A decision should be made on the basis of arguments and values and not gifts. Is it effective? Often, unfortunately, it is, because offering money or trips or a swimming pool in the garden or making threats to change a position is a practice that happens all over the world. But very often it's not effective. A parliamentarian can make such a sudden turn in her argumentation that others consider her not to be reliable. Or when the scheme is being found out, it reflects very negative on the reputation of the decision maker that has been bribed, and she can be punished or sent away out of her office. And it also reflects negatively on the lobbyist. So there should be rules for lobbyists. In this webinar, we want to make you acquainted with the CLASP principles. And these principles guide the lobbyist to influence in an ethical and effective way. And my colleagues Linda and Zoe will tell you more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Sabina. That was a very juicy example of how things can go wrong. but you come across questions like what you've seen, what you've no doubt been reading on this slide here, asking you as a lobbyist or an advocate, and this is a this is a colleague of ours who is actually present with us here, who has been having conversations with the former DG of the World Trade Organization, Pascal Lamy, who asked her, well, who do you represent? How many are you? And how do I know that what you tell is the truth? Or are you just voicing your own personal ideas? And so these are legitimate questions that actually any decision maker, any policy influencing target that you approach should be asking you. And in response to that, you should be able to convincingly bring your message across of how you represent others, how your message is actually credible. So these are legitimate questions, and let's tackle these and unpack at the same time our time-tested method to ensure that you become a reputable advocate and lobbyist. And those are the CLASP principles that you've seen in the advert for this webinar. And here they are. The CLASP principles are all about quality in all stages of your work in lobbying. So let's have a look at them. What are they? They are credibility, legitimacy, accountability, service-orientedness, and being aware of your and others' power base. So by analyzing and gearing your ways of working based on these CLASP principles, you will be able to be ethical, but also be very effective in your policy influencing. So we're going to dive into the first one. Let's talk about this Pinocchio here. Zoe?
Yes. So credibility is the first principle for us to be aware of and for us to use. What is credibility? It relates to our reliability, our trustworthiness, and our expertise. But it's not about whether we believe that we are reliable or that we are an expert. The foundation of credibility is actually others' perception of us. What do the media think about us? What do other civil society organizations think about us? What do politicians or people who are part of the government think about us? Do they believe that we are reliable, that we are worthy of trust? That we are a good source of expertise. So how can we do this? We would like to hear a few ideas from you. So we would like you to put your ideas in the chat. How can we become credible? How can we, amplify our reputation or our brand as such to be credible? I see a few ideas. We do what we say, okay? So we have integrity. We have clear communication and honesty. Honesty when things go well, maybe honesty when things don't go well also. Transparency, that's a very good one, Zaya. Habiba mentions legal presence. Okay, so we're properly registered and we show evidence. We use facts, we use authenticity. I see transparency, integrity. These keywords are definitely coming up a few times. Okay. So a lot of good ideas in the chat. I want to show you a few ideas from us. The first one is that we need to do our research. We need to know our stuff. So we need to have the facts. We need to understand from the people who are affected by the issue. And then we need to publish and share this research and make it publicly available. we can publish it openly. We can provide it to anyone who needs it, whether they're our political targets or whether they are our allies. And in both of those, both the processes of doing research and finding our arguments, finding our facts, and providing that, we need to involve our constituency. That means we need to involve the people who are directly affected by that issue. And lastly, we need to amplify that using media, whether that's traditional media, for example, being the go-to organization that the media would interview about particular issues, or using our social media to make that information more available to anybody who wants to know. And lastly, we need to budget for this. Not only the budget, but we need to plan for this. Do you have somebody in your organization who is dedicated to fact finding and publication, sharing about your arguments and your facts? So are you the go-to organization for your issue? So thanks for your ideas in the chat as well. I think we can move to the next session.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. The second principle, so we're now at the L, is legitimacy. And this is all about being representative in what you voice in your messages. And that has to do with, have you been mandated to speak on behalf of other people, or are you only speaking for yourself? So we've seen that, yeah, it's important already that your constituency, so the people who you represent, that they have participated or that they have been at the basis of what you are voicing. And also, are you voicing the positions that they actually have? Have you consulted them? So you can see here a few pictures. Maybe you recognize the one on top, who is a now also aging popular singer called Sting, who maybe you know, who has been awarded prizes and so on for fighting for the rights of indigenous people in the Amazon. He has accepted a lot of praise for this, and so obviously, apparently, he has managed to be an credible, legitimate representative of those groups. But another picture that you see there, and those who have been in our first webinar we did last year in August may recognize this picture. Here we have the Dutch farmers again, who drive their tractors onto the road, because a lot of the farmers, this is about an issue to do with nitrogen deposits and the legal framework around it. The Dutch farmers, quite a few of them, didn't accept the traditional representations by farmer organizations to politics. So they went ahead and organized their own protests. So they didn't find that the farmer organizations were legitimate in representing them, talking to the Dutch decision makers, the policy makers. So sometimes it's clear in society that advocates do not have the legitimacy, are not seen as representative. So again, the question to you to put in the chat, how do you ensure that you are legitimate in your work? How can you show that? So go ahead and put your suggestions in the chat for legitimacy. How do you do that? I see already DJ, yeah, saying that you can mention the numbers. I represent 4 million workers affiliated. You can present your expertise. So that would be expertise also when it's recognized expertise by your by the people you try to represent. How to be legitimate by member consultation, says Habiba. Yeah, certainly. Raymond mentions evidence-based. That's also a credibility aspect. Habiba says doing needs assessment and validation, right? With the people that you represent, providing evidence. Yeah. Legitimacy. So it's especially about who you represent. Yeah, I think we carry on. And in our view, we see that the advocacy, a major advocacy principle is that first and foremost, you seek to have people represent themselves, of course. So advocacy by the people themselves. If that is, that's of course not always directly possible, or more is needed. So then the next step would be that you as a, maybe as an advocate or a lobbyist, you try as much as possible to work with the people that you claim to represent. And there are also situations where you have to voice opinions for the people. That's where legitimacy increasingly comes in, from by the people, with the people, to for the people. So practical solutions to this issue is to make sure that you together frame your messages. So you do joint positioning. You look at the argumentation and come up with good positions that are supported by your constituency. Make sure that you share information and receive and share feedback amongst the groups that you work with and that you represent. You can also involve the boards of organizations and people from the constituencies themselves, of course, in your advocacy and lobby work. And again, lastly, not to forget that for all those activities that you duly do to increase your legitimacy, make sure that you budget for this and take time for it, so that you come to the table well prepared, and not having had to do things in a hurry and without being able to cover for costs that are related to ensuring good legitimacy. We're going to the next one.
So accountability, and we already saw this keyword come up in the chat several times. Indeed, it might be related to some of the other principles. So being accountable means that we are responsible for our actions. We are answerable, so others can probe us, can investigate, can ask what our sources are. We are transparent about how we organize ourselves, and we're liable. It means that we're actually, we're accountable for whatever goes right and whatever goes wrong. So how to be accountable? We have a few different ways. The first one is we need to look backwards. So we call this backwards accountability. From where do we get our information, our evidence, our data? From where did we formulate our argument? We need to look back at that. And from where did we get our funds? So we need to look backwards to do that. And then we need to look forwards. How can we share this information with others? How can we share how we organized ourselves, how we resourced ourselves, both in terms of our argument and the funding source for our organization? So being open about this to our constituency or our members, our board, other stakeholders like the media, like the government. And ideally, we publish this openly, so we're completely transparent about how we operate. And mutual accountability is about building the relationship between us and our partners, our other stakeholders. So making sure that we open up that space so that they can ask us any questions, they can probe us, they have the right to question how we're doing things or if there's any unclarity. And we have a positive and constructive attitude towards that. So there we have a few pointers about accountability. Yes, and I think we can move on to the next principle.
Yeah, thank you, Zoe. I'm going to speed up a bit because I'm watching the time and we've promised you to stop at 11:40. So on service-orientedness, that's principle number 4. This is about the attitude that you have towards your political targets, media, and other stakeholders. So how can you satisfy those audiences by being service-oriented?
But service-oriented, it's talking about our attitude towards our political targets. We don't want to make their life difficult, even if they are our opponent as such. If they have a different opinion to us, they have a different stance. Can we do something to actually make their life easier and make it more likely that they might join us or they might change their opinion? So a few tips from MDF's side is we need to listen to them. This will actually help us to become a lot more effective at negotiation because we can understand the real root of their interests. What are they really trying to do or trying to achieve? So listening to them, reading between the lines is super important. We need to have the attitude that we're not trying to treat them as our enemies. So trying to have a win-win relationship, even if they're our opponents. We need to leave our pride at home. So we need to have some sense of humbleness. Do as we promise. Yeah, so don't leave people hanging. We need to deliver the things that we say that we're going to deliver. And only provide the relevant information. It's really easy when we're doing campaigning to absolutely bombard people with information. But in this day and age, when there's information overload, this makes people's lives really harder. So can we produce, the information or the documents or whatever people need, just the things that they directly need, summaries and briefs, and at the right time and of high quality. So being service-oriented, something that we don't first think of, but is really important to make our campaigning effective. The last principle is power. Yeah. Power, we're talking about power as an individual or as a collective together with our alliance or maybe other civil society organizations with the private sector, anybody else who's on our side, and using a political force to achieve our purpose. So power, what is power? What comes to your mind when we think about power? Is power good or bad for us to use? What do you think? Influence. I was saying, okay. So reflect on that and write what comes to your mind in the chat. At the same time, I'm going to provide a few tips from MDF's side. What is power? We think about power in 4 different ways. So firstly, we think about power over. This is the traditional type of power. We tend to think that authority figures, government has the power over us or over the environment, over the jurisdiction and the laws. But we also have other definition of power. So the power to do something. What are the resources that we have behind us? Maybe we have information, evidence, we have a really good budget, we have a lot of support, we have things that enable us to achieve something. We also have power with. So when we get together with our allies or other organizations or individuals who take a united stand with us, we increase our power as a collective. So power with can be something very effective. And finally, the power within is something very important. When we do advocacy and policy influencing, it's really challenging. Often we're working for many years on the same issue. We can face a lot of backlash. We can face a lot of opposition. So we need to believe really deeply in what we're trying to do. We need to be really convinced of what we stand for. So assessing the power is something that for those of you who joined the Advocacy and Policy Influencing courses with MDF, we guide you through a process to analyze the power of all the actors. So whether they are, traditional holders of power or holding this. And I see in the chat, yes, it depends on the situation. That is exactly correct. What is the situation? Who are the actors? How much power do they have, both over the policy process and over each other? And how can we change something? Yeah. So how can we make a shift in the power dynamic? That's a really key question if you're doing advocacy and policy influencing. Yes. So the maybe Linda, you're back with us. Yeah,
I'm back.
Go ahead.
So to round off, we've taken you through quite quickly the 5 CLASP principles that we use to guarantee quality in our work in advocacy and lobbying influencing, and to be reputable, therefore, to become reputable. So we talked about credibility. Why would people believe or trust you on the basis of what you say, the quality of what you bring across? Legitimacy, who do you represent? Who do you claim to be speaking for? Accountability, how do you prove that you're credible and legitimate? Service-oriented, how are you being helpful to your targets, the people you talk to? And how can you use power, be aware of power, and use it yourself to be also effective? So those 5 principles are what we went through quickly. These are also at the basis of our training and our own consultancy
if you want to
work.
Discuss more, if you have any other questions, you can also contact us via LinkedIn. So I'm sharing here on our chat the LinkedIn of our trainers, so you can continue contact us if you have any questions about these principles. And we also would like to announce that we have like a specific courses in advocacy and policy influencing during this year, like online and blended. So Sabine, I think we would like to say something about it, right?
Yes, I can. Well, I'm just, I think if you want to learn more about advocacy and policy influencing, we will have a face-to-face course in Ede in the Netherlands starting the end of February already. And that will take some 2-3 weeks. It's blended, so it's part online and part face-to-face. In October, we will have another blended meeting, partly face-to-face. And in May, we will have a face-to-face training in Bangkok. And then at the end of the year, around November, we are planning to do an online course. So yeah, have a look at the links and see if you would like to join us, because we would love to see you again.